Welcome. Today we are going to continue with the rest of the portion of the discussion on decision making in organizations. In the last session we have come to know like what is decision making, what are the different types of decisions like program decisions and non-program decisions, how to go for rational decision making, how to go for bounded rationality model of decision making, and we discussed mainly decision making at the individual levels. Today we are going to concentrate more on decision making at the group level and decision making at the organizational level, the constraints faced from the organization side maybe in decision making process, how they affect how the constraints affect the decision making process, and how do we try to overcome these constraints. So, we will start our discussion with group decision making. So, group decision making is prevalent in more for non-program decisions. So, they are more used while people are trying to make decisions regarding which maybe you have to generate multiple alternatives and you have to prioritize the alternatives and then come to solutions, and it is more used in case of non-programmed decisions where there is uncertainty and we do not have a clear path of how to reach a particular solution, and like we have to find out the solutions from, and as many alternatives are there, it is better. So, in those cases group decision making is more useful and it is used for that purpose in the organization. When we are thinking of like what are the steps of group decision making, there are 4 steps to it. First is the orientation stage, in which the group members becomes oriented to the problem at hand. Second, there is a conflict stage in which the group members, after they come to know each other, there is sometimes a difference in opinion and people debate about the alternatives that they are thinking of. So, this stage is called the conflict stage. There is an emergence stage in that sense, like after a certain conflict is over, some groups, some solutions emerge, and from the various alternatives provided by the different members. And at the last, which is called a reinforcement stage, in the reinforcement stage, one of the solutions or a group of solutions in like what is jointly decided by the group members, that gets reinforced by positive feedback from other group members. So, that is these are the 4 stages of how decision making is done in the group. So, what are the strengths of a group decision making? If you have to understand that in group decision making, the first strength of group decision making or the strong point is that you come to know about the whole of the information, maybe both positive and negative, about a certain problem or the certain issues which needs to be discussed. So, that is very important in the sense it generates more complete information and knowledge, like different members bring their different viewpoints, and from those we get a holistic idea about the problem at hand. Next we can go for like it's more diversity of views are there when you're trying to consult as many as group members who are there. So, diversity of views we can get regarding a particular problem, we get a new angle of looking at a particular problem. Then when many people are contributing in the decision making process, what happens, acceptance of the solution also becomes easy, in the sense as people are participating in the decision making process. So, they know what the problem is about and how the solution has been reached, and they can identify more with the solution which is being accepted and generally accepted, and so all of them try to accept that particular solution because they have been involved in the decision making process. The weaknesses of group decision making rather are there could be sometimes conformity of pressures, like and that happens when some person is very strong or the groups have a difference in status, and it's generally the person who is more high up in the power hierarchy or more status, generally they decide, and the people who are generally timid, shy, cannot speak in that way, they try to accept the whatever has been decided by the dominant members, and they either remain silent or do not participate in the decision making process. So and to retain their membership in that group could be conformity sometimes is a pressure, like you have to conform if you want to retain yourself as a member of that group. Then second is, of course, like what we discussed, is sometimes group discussions get dominated by one or two members, and that is how the whole process goes through, like their views become the view of the group. Then as in a group all decide together, decide about certain solutions and outcomes, it's there is no individual responsibility, defined responsibility as such, and that is called ambiguous responsibility, as responsibility gets diffused amongst the group members. So these are the weaknesses of a group decision making process. Now if we are to tell like whether it is more effective than individual decision making process or not, so it varies according to like what we mean by what is effectiveness. Like if we talk of like whether it's more accurate or not, generally this decision making process of group decision making is more accurate than like if an average individual is making a decision, but it's less accurate than a very accurate individual making a particular decision. If we talk of effectiveness in terms of speed, individual decision makings, they are more speedy than group decision making. If we are talking of like creativity as a yardstick of effectiveness, then groups are more effective than or superior than when we talk of individual decision making. And whether it is when it is acceptance of the final solution, obviously group is far superior than that of the individual, because if individuals decide separately, and then it's very hard to come to a consensus, but and arrive at a particular solution and accept it. Like, but if the groups decide, then because people have participated in the decision making process, it's easy for them to accept. When you're talking in terms of efficiency, then individual decisions are more efficient because it takes less time and people can think of their own solution and reach to a particular solution. Now, when comparable quantities of diverse input is to be compared, and then we have to arrive at a particular solution, then group decision is superior to individual decision making. Now, in the decision making, we can see like because there are like pressures to confirm an influence of a dominant personality type in the group, there is a status incongruity and framing effects are there. All these negative influences to open group discussion give rise to two phenomena in the group decision making, which is called groupthink and group shift. In groupthink, what happens? It's a phenomena in which the norm for consensus overrides the realistic appraisal of alternative courses of action. So, group members, what they may do, because there is a pressure to conform, may rationalize any resistance to their own thought processes, assumptions they have made. So, they do not want to be out of the group. So, members, what they do, they sometimes make direct pressures, they sometimes pressure us directly, who are somewhat less powerful, and they have to, and the pressure is them to accept what the dominant members are telling. Next is members who have doubts. What they do is they generally do not speak up, and they keep silent, and this silence is taken as a measure of conformity, and which is called an illusion of unanimity. Though the member is not speaking because he or she does not want to express the doubts in front of others and come to an embarrassing position maybe, so they decide to keep silent, and that silence is interpreted as acceptance of the solution. So, this whole process is called group thing. There is another phenomena which is arising, which is called group shift, which is the groups try to shift towards a particular way of looking at a problem. It could be first of risky nature, or it could be like very conservative in nature. Now, whether a group is going to be risky in decision making, risky in nature, conservative in nature, it depends on the initial decision, how it starts, and what way it takes. And generally, group shift is more towards the extreme of that initial decision making process, how it starts. So, why, if you ask the question, why people prone to take more risky decisions while in a group? Because in the presence of each other, the inhibition is generally not there, and people become comfortable with each other, and then they try to take certain risks, and they become bold and daring. Next is because the groups diffuse responsibility, so people may try taking a particular risk. Then group decisions, so there is no individual accountability. First is a group accountability, so individuals are more free to make certain decisions. So, and generally what happens, by taking certain extreme positions, people try to prove like they are committed to a particular cause that they have taken up. So, all these processes may shift a group decision making towards more being risky in nature. Next, we will try to see some of the techniques which are there when you are talking of decision making in groups, like brainstorming and nominal group technique, and then electronic mail is there. So, Delphi techniques, these are some of the techniques of decision making in groups. So, before that, we will just have a look into the decision process in a group. Like, groups do better in establishing goals and objectives because of a greater knowledge pool. Individual efforts are required in identifying causes and developing alternate solutions to a broad problem searching functions. Groups evaluate alternative solutions more effectively because of the group's collective judgment. Groups accept more risk than individuals at the point of solution selection. The solution is more likely to be accepted, and implementation and follow-up are usually made by individual managers, whether or not the decision is made by a group. So, what we find in this discussion is like some mix of group effort and individual effort in the process of decision making. And when you're talking of creativity in decision making, group decision making, and like these, all the 4 processes of decision making in groups, like nominal group technique, or when you're talking of Delphi technique, or when you're talking of brainstorming. So what we look into is to creative solutions, and creativity in group decision making is where we look into more novel ideas and to solve a problem or capture an opportunity, and it depends on some characteristics, like personality characteristics like perseverance, then risk taking propensity, openness, tolerance for ambiguity. These are the certain personality qualities that is required for creative decision making. And the techniques that we will be discussing are like brainstorming, one of the major important parts of organizational decision making. So brainstorming is like implemented by a set of rules. So here we are allowed to state any ideas that come to our mind with extreme, like whether it's very extreme of nature, and then each of the ideas which are belonging to the group are visited, and the solutions are built up on that idea. So people tend to interact with the others and try to find out new ideas. One idea lead to the formation of the other idea, and in that way the whole discussion goes on, and this process is called the brainstorming. So one of the cautious caution point that we have to maintain over here, we are to generate ideas, we are to think of more and more ideas, but we are not to evaluate ideas. Like we cannot pass a judgment like this is a very good idea, this is a bad idea, this is a like so sort of idea. So these evaluations are not possible. The only factor of this brainstorming session is to generate alternatives, relevant alternatives, as many as possible from the different members present in the discussion group or the brainstorming group. So what like if you're not cautious about like not evaluating ideas, but only just helping to generate ideas, what may lead to is a block which is called production block. In the sense, when many people are talking simultaneously together, we are not able to hear or not able to answer properly to a particular solution which could be there, and because this whole thing have blocked the thought process, and gradually what happens, it will block the sharing of ideas also. Next important technique for creativity is of course the Delphi technique. So it involves soliciting and comparing anonymous judgments based on certain problem or set of sequential questionnaires. So it involves no face-to-face interaction between the judges, and questionnaire is sent to participants via email, and surveys and responses summarized be analyzed. Participants receive a written summary again by mail along with the second questionnaire for reassessment, and participants independently evaluate their earlier problem and the responses that they have suggested. So analysts typically go with tabulated results as the decision after the second or third round. So these round and round of taking suggestions and arriving at a particular way of decision, and particular decision goes on and on until a quite a satisfying solution is reached to. Nominal group technique is a technique in which the members collectively come, they sit around the table, but there is no, they do not speak, So, though in sort of a group situation, they try to maintain individuality. So, each of the members writes on the pad of paper like the ideas coming to his or her mind. Then all the ideas are like each individual is given a chance to speak and present his or her own views, and during this time no discussion is allowed. All have to listen to what a particular person is speaking about. Then is structured after that the whole round of discussion is over, then a structured discussion takes place and each idea receives the attention. So, after discussion, so each member votes by a private vote, very privately, by ranking alternatives. So, what happens is the group decision is a mathematically pooled vote outcome. So, though it is a group situation, here individuals function independently. As interpersonal communication is restricted during decision making process, each members work independently, they give their feedback independently, each member produces his or her idea to the group, and no discussion takes place until and unless all the ideas have been presented and recorded. So, group discussions, clarity and evaluation theme, in the sense like in order to get clarity and to rank order them, the decision makers again function individually and try to rank order the situations according to their own preferences, which again gets discussed, and ultimately the solution which is getting most of the preferences gets selected. Electronic meeting is something where maybe 10-50 people come together, they sit in front of the computers and they start give their feedback in the other comments on the computers, which gets flashed on a bigger screen, and from there they try to arrive at a conclusion, they arrive at a solution regarding the problem at hand. So, what has happened is here, if you can understand, there is low interpersonal communication, because each is coming, sitting in front of the computer, giving the feedback, and that feedback is shown everywhere, and someone makes changes which is anonymous, and again you have to revisit, and this process goes on till some good solution is reached. So, what we may feel over here is these less of face-to-face interactions then may result in reduced member satisfaction, and as compared to the face-to-face group, and maybe is not a good process of decision making. Now, when you talk about Delphi and nominal group technique differs. So, one is the membership anonymity in your Delphi group, it's yes, in nominal group technique it's no. Face to face interaction, nominal group technique is yes, then Delphi is no. Model of communication, Delphi is written only, nominal group technique is written and oral. So, this is how you can classify these two methods, though they appear to be very similar, overlappingly similar. So, this is how you try to differentiate. Then we have, after we are talking of decision making at the group levels and maybe some of the important issues regarding what could be the problems of group decision making, like group think, group shift, and what are the different types of decision making techniques, like if you are talking of creative decision making. The next thing that we will move up to or discuss over here is organizational decision making process. So, here what we are more considering about is like if in organization as a unit there is a system and some decision has to be made, and like who is responsible for it, who tries to capture that emotion first, how is like then what are the processes, like if you are to, like, organization as a whole has to decide something, and it has to be decided at a certain level, then beyond this group decision making, which is functioning at a group level, at the organizational level, like some decision has to be made regarding the policy of the organization, strategic measurements of the organization, steps to be taken, sort of. So what are the different decision making process? There are 4, like that you're talking of: management science approach, Carnegie model, like it's incremental decision making, and garbage can model. So if uncertainty is there, like managers have many constraints and conflicts, managers have diverse goals, opinions, values and experience, these come together in coalition formation, like hold joint discussions and interpret goals and problems, the share opinions and obtain social support for problem solution, and leading to search of use established procedures, if appropriate create a solution if needed, and satisfying decision in the sense it is one of the processes where you choose the first alternative which arrives to you and you move forward in that way. So where to place the which type of decision process is very important when we are talking of organization's perspective in mind. If you are talking of contingency decision making from framework, so this is a decision making approach which is contingent on the organization setting. So 2 of the characteristics of the organization that determine the use of decision approaches are problem consensus, where people come to a consensus about a particular problem or a group of problem that needs solution, and second is the technical knowledge, so about the need to solve particular problem. So these 2, how to arrive at a consensus regarding a problem and how to decide on the technical problems which are required to solve, technical knowledge which are required to solve the problem. These are the major 2 things which determines which of the decision approach should be taken, and which will be rather a better one. So what we can look into, like the different decision making tools, and we have a list of tools like flow charts, run charts, Pareto charts, fishbone diagram, scatter diagram, pie chart, then tree diagram, an interrelationship diagram, matrix diagram, 6-set thinking. These and many more will add to like the different decision making tools, and it's like, because in this short span it is not possible to cover the details about all the different things listed, then it's useful if the learners like try to learn it from their on their own part, like regarding what is this, what is a flow chart, what is a run chart, and tree diagram, and all these things. So you can refer to the net to find out like how this decision making takes place at the group level. Next important phase is while we are deciding on how to decide. In deciding how to decide, Broom, Yatton and Jago decision making model provides a useful framework for identifying the best leadership style to adapt to the situation one is in. So and it takes from of many like branching sort of model while we are talking of decision making and the situation you are in. A systematic approach to decision making is that uncertainty, like many facts may not be known to us. Complexity, the decisions are very complex in nature. Then high risk consequences, like the impact of the decision may be significant. So whatever you decide may mean a lot to a particular person or his or her life. So these are the impact of the decisions. Alternatives, so each one, each has its own set of uncertainties and consequences. And lastly, interpersonal issues is, it can be difficult to predict how other people will react. So these are like some of the ways or some of the steps which are involved in systematic decision making systematic decision making in the organization. So, but you have to follow the steps very carefully, which is uncertainty, complexity, high risk, consequences, then alternatives, and alternatives, and taking care of the interpersonal issues, like trying to be sure about how others are going to react to the decision taking. There are like 6 steps to make an effective decision, like create a constructive environment, generate good alternatives, explore these alternatives what are there, choose the best alternative, choose your direction and communicate your direction and take action. These are the 6 well defined steps of making an effective decision. But these are the steps to be followed, and not these steps becomes more meaningful when we try to think of the organizational issues in the decision making. So, but before going to that, we will try to see each of the steps in a bit detail. Like step 1 is creating a constructive environment. So what is done in that case is establishing the objective, then how to treat the right people. So how to hear the opinions made, and how to ask a proper question, and how creativity can be used as a tool from the start itself. These are the 4 ways of looking into the problem while we are going for creating a constructive environment. When you are talking of generate good alternatives, there are different ways, different processes available. So like even if you search net, you will find so many tools of good decision making, and maybe we will not go to the details of it over here, because there is a large pool of information that you can see from the internet. What we are trying to see, make it possible for you here, is to see the different, like how good alternatives get generated, and what different techniques you can place under these alternatives. So like first is the generating of ideas, which can be taken through brainstorming, reverse brainstorming, or Charlotte procedure, or crowd of sleep writing technique, whatever it is. These are the 4 techniques undertaken to generate ideas. Considering different perspectives is reframing matrix concept for an appreciative inquiry. So these are the techniques again which may tell you like how to be tolerant to the different perspectives. When you're talking of the ideas from the part of the organization, the tools which are used are more as affinity diagrams, and if you're talking of risk to be taken, then risk analysis is done, and how the implication is done by thinking hats, 6 thinking hats, and we have to talk of impact analysis. So how to validate it is like when we go for force field analysis, plus minus interesting areas in the whole thing of the what has been presented, and cost benefit analysis. These are new ways of measuring the validity of the particular case, like how it's been discussed, and it's a problem. So maybe step by step we go and we try to find out how it's been validated, whatever solution we are providing. When you're talking of choose the best alternatives, again there are a few techniques like grid analysis, paired comparison, decision trees, and all this may help us to choose the best alternative among the 3-4 alternatives that's given over here. When we are talking of constraints in decision making, so these are the constraints which are imposed by the organizations in the decision making process. First is the performance evaluation. So, managers are quite often influenced by the decision making, they keep at the back of their mind how different decisions will affect their own performance evaluation which the superior will make. So, if a college dean believes that if good instruction is given, then no more than about 10% of the students would fail, then each of the instructions would more likely than not ensure that this happens, so as to avoid poor evaluations for themselves. So, these things like what is the influence of some aspect of the organizational phenomena in the decision making process, and one of these is the performance evaluation, of which everybody is much concerned about and don't want to disturb it by thinking of something very great and different. So, that is called like our organizational constraint, which is performance evaluation. Then next is the reward system. If the organization rewards innovations and risk taking, then they will tend to take such behavior, but if it is not, then they will not be risk taking. Formalization. So, if there are too much of rules and regulations in the process, it will limit the decision making process. Time and cost deadlines, it is like cost is a factor and time is a factor, in the sense if a decision is too much costly or it involves too much of time, then such deadlines determine which types of decision making process we are to undertake. And there are some historical precedents, in the sense like if someone very powerful is there in front, and that their process of guiding, their ways of thinking may direct like which process to take in the and if they have taken some decisions in this type of group of problems that we are facing, like generally those try to influence the present decision making process. There are cultural differences also, like different cultures have different value systems, so they understand different things, they give meanings of different things in different ways, like their concept of time is different, role of the group, role sender, receiver, then interpretation of the situations. So, whether to use an intuitive approach or a rational approach, people differ in cultures on these variables. And if we are talking of a cross-cultural group, then like in multinational organizations, so they are to be sensitized, they must be knowing these differences and how the culture affects it and what needs to be done. So, before we arrive at the question, maybe we will just try to visit once again into this model, which is generally it's very important when we are talking of group organizational decisions processes, like how to deal with uncertainty, how to deal with the conflict, and how to arrive, which is more important, is how to arrive at a satisfying decisions, because decision, it's not possible like to arrive at a decision which is like all are going to accept it, and it is going to, like when we are talking of rational decision making, like search for all the alternatives possible and then try to arrive at particular solution, because those processes are very time consuming. So what happens in organizational decisions and in group decision making is like it's a mixture of like the different techniques known, different tools are used, mathematical tools are used, or like to more recent tools like thinking hats, then fishbone diagram, Rumyatten's model, or Pareto analysis. Something is used along with the creative and intuitive decision making things, which helps to arrive at a decision and its solution, which is, we cannot tell like it is the best like optimum solution with no errors in it, but we try to minimize the error as much as possible and try to arrive at a solution which is more rational as well as intuitive, which takes less of time, which is more effective, and maybe takes care of the constraints and suits the need of the organization for that short term and the long term perspective. So it's a like mixture of everything, like when you're talking of individuals decision making, group decision making, and organization processes. Sometimes we take care of this garbage can models also, like we try to get from the storehouse of knowledge which is there. Maybe which in earlier cases we don't find it to be relevant, but for the present decisions we try to draw the analogy and try to decide from those aspects, like, and sometimes it's what we can tell, like it's a mix of both rational way of decision and intuitive way of decision. If there is a balance between this thing, and like we take both the left brain way of deciding and the right brain way of deciding, we try to keep a balance on all these things and use the relevant tools available. There are lots of tools of decision making which are there, and we can use our search medias, like we can use the electronic medias, we can use for we can give find out the searches for the different techniques which are there, and find out like which technique is best suitable for the purpose, for the decision that we are making at present, because each of the decision making techniques and tools which are there are brought with pros and cons. So it's not that one process is like foolproof with no error part of it. We have to do a mix and match of the techniques which are there and use them in a proper way to reach a particular solution which is mostly accepted by all and which serves the purpose of the organization in a much better way. So with that we will move to the questions, like what are the different types of decisions. In this connection, describe the managerial decision making in the organization, describe the decision making process in the organization, what are the behavioral influences on decision making. In this connection, describe the different decision making styles, compare the individual decision making and group decision making processes, what is creativity in group decision making, describe the various decision making processes, creative decision making processes. So what are the different types of organizational decision making, like in this connection describe the contingency framework for using decision models. So what is a systematic approach for decision making. So and in this connection describe the use of different tools for decision making, systematic decision making, and you have to discuss about the constraints on decision making and the cultural differences in decision making. So, by answering these questions and discussing based on like the discussion done over here and practicing them while like practicing a creative way of decision making and systematic, following the systematic processes of decision making according to the defined steps, like search for a problem, search for the available alternatives, find out what are the positives and negatives of the alternatives, compare the alternatives, then arrive at particular number of solutions, find out which solution is best, find out how it can be implemented, what are the constraints faced at the organizational level while implementing it, which type of individuals are more comfortable with what type of decisions, how individual variables affect decision making process in the terms of the personality, values, attitudes, etc., perceptions. If we take care of all these factors and what are the mathematical tools of decision making, how to make creative decisions, how to encourage people to make creative decisions, for that, like what tolerance we should show, like tolerance for ambiguity, like what are the time constraints, and based on time constraints do we go for creative solutions or we go for rational solutions. Taking all these factors in mind, we have to know how to decide in based on a particular context, in a particular situation and time frame. So when this is done, we think we can arrive, we can know what is the proper technique of decision making, and we can decide properly, which will lead to enhanced individual, group and organizational performance. Thank you.